Good morning. Welcome to Caffeinate Your Career. Today's topic, telling stories in interviews. I'm your host, the career coach with the most, Jason Hopper. With me today is the sensational Senior Director of Career and Financial Services, my co-host and back from vacation, Allison Harding.
Hi, everybody.
Also with me today is Jewish Family Services marvelous Marketing Director, Miss Sophia Stoller. Sophia, welcome to Caffeinate Your Career.
Thanks for having me here.
I'm happy that you are here. So, telling stories, there's an art to telling stories, right? There's also an art to interviewing. The question is, should you tell stories in the interview?
Absolutely. And the reason why is because the best story is going to win. So it's very important for everyone to be prepared when they're going for an interview to really think about what their brand is, what makes them unique, and for them to really be able to share their stories so that they can stand out and they can be remembered.
Allison.
So I love stories. I think during doing interviewing and I'd rather listen to a story than your list of accomplishments, because it's showing me how you achieved those accomplishments versus, I saw, or I sold, or I did. That's why I like the stories.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback off of that, I think it's really easy for people to just list off skills and experiences. Mm-hmm. And when you tell a story, it really it makes you different from everybody else. You're able to list your unique abilities, and it makes it more exciting, and it makes you be more memorable.
I think it's easy for you to say. I think that's right. It's important to be able to show your personality and showcase it, because you're right. Like the person that has the best story is often the one that's remembered, and that's really the goal of the interviews. You're going to make sure that you're going to be remembered. Allison, you said a minute ago, it's a good way to demonstrate your skills. I think it's kind of important, instead of just saying, hey, I'm great at solving problems, to tell a story on how it is you actually solved a challenging problem.
Right. And in those stories, and I think you can probably delve into this a little bit deeper, Sophia, is that story can tell a good story that you were successful in, and also a story where maybe you weren't as successful, but one where you learned and have changed your motivations to be able to do something better.
Absolutely. So when you actually tell a story, it's really important for us to form an emotional connection. And that's what we can do when we tell our stories, because we can show our vulnerability and we can show them the lessons that we have learned from our past experiences. And it really tells the person that's interviewing you that you're someone that's willing to learn and grow and has been through a conflict and has been able to get through it, whether you succeeded or not, but how did you manage yourself during that conflict? So being able to be vulnerable and show some learning experiences is a great tip.
Right, because I think being vulnerable and showing that you are not a robot. Because oftentimes people, that's true though, they go into the interview and they're just like stiff and rigid and just like not their authentic self when they go and interview. And I think that's what makes the difference.
I agree. And we've said this many times, interviewing isn't easy for either person, because even managers who are interviewing you, that's not their role, that's not their job. And so they're sometimes as robotic as the person being interviewed. So if you go in with some stories and loosen them up and loosen yourself up, you're building a relationship, and that's what creates your ability to be able to get an offer.
I think you brought up a really good point. When you're telling the stories, you're helping to build that rapport. And I think sometimes you open yourself up and you actually show a side that you're going to be able to connect with the person that you're being interviewed with. And so they would have never seen that had you just talk about your skills and your experiences.
And interviews change so much today. I mean, 20 years ago, you never told a story. You walked in, you did exactly what you're talking about. These are my skills. This is what I do. How am I going to build this relationship with you? Today, interviewing is so different with behavioral questions and with being able to build your brand and say who you are and how you did it. It's more important to be able to go in prepared with those stories. Don't just sit there and think, oh my gosh, what am I going to say next?
So that's a great point, Allison. We talk about behavioral-based interview questions and using the STAR method to answer those questions. So, guys, just so you know, STAR is a acronym. It stands for Situation, Task, Action, and Result. It's basically the story of how you solve the problem. These are going to be those behavioral-based interview questions like, tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with a coworker, or tell me about a time when you failed and what did you learn about it. That's one I like a lot. Or tell me about a time when you had a customer that was not satisfied, or time management, or whatever. And so you need to be able to craft stories around those questions so that you can provide context in answering those type of questions.
Absolutely, and being able to answer the question is really important. Being able to listen to what the question's really asking you is even more important. Too many, and I'm not going to say too many times, but sometimes, I got to get the right word. Sometimes we don't listen to what the question really is, and we tell a story of what we want them to hear versus what the interviewer wants to hear. And it's really important that, especially in telling a story, your stories are going to be good because they're going to be crafted, but you also have to figure out where your story's going to fit in. You can't just blurt something out just to...
I think you brought up a really good point. It's important to listen. When you're in an interview process, it needs to be a back and forth conversation, not just you telling a story, but also finding a way to connect with the interviewer. And being able to provide that feedback and listen and being able to respond more quickly with a great story that you're able to connect with them in that level. But I think it's important to remember that, to always be vulnerable and have a bunch of stories prepared.
We have, we have a practice interview program, and we have volunteers that will talk with the participants of the program that have a lot of experience in interviewing and hiring people. And the number one piece of feedback that almost everybody gives is you need to answer the question. It's like they are not answering the question. They're talking around it and not specifically answering the question that the interviewer asked. So like straight up, tell the story, but also make sure that you're answering the question that they asked you. All the time.
All the time. So the hardest question to answer, do you know what it is? Do you know what it is?
Why don't you tell me?
What was your salary?
Oh, well, for sure.
Because nobody likes to talk.
Nobody likes talking about money.
And so people will walk around it. Well, I made between 75 and 80,000. Really? Between? You don't know what you made. And I've told this many times, my old boss, if you didn't answer the question, no matter how good you were, how many interviews you had, she would stand up, shake your hand, and thank you. And they'd be like, what happened? And she said, you don't follow directions.
You didn't answer the question.
You didn't answer the question. And so don't be afraid to answer a question. You can then qualify it. You know, I made $62,000, but I'd really like to be making 67, and I believe my qualifications justify that. Give an answer, and it's just important enough that it's still part of that rapport that we're trying to build, and be able to give good answers and let them know why.
I think the interviewer is also looking for someone to see if they're a good communicator.
Yes.
And if they're able to communicate, so if you have someone that's going to be talking in circles and not answering the question, think about how can you practice. Practicing your stories, I think, is a really good tip here. And then making sure that you are, hitting that STAR method, so that will keep you on track.
That is the number one misstep I see in job seekers when they go to interview, is they did not put enough practice into the interview process and working on their stories.
So in those stories, and I think you can support this, there's 3 sections: either the situation of the task, the action, and the result. A lot of people will give the situation and the action and then stop. Oh, I had this client, she was so unhappy, but when I listened and came up with a couple solutions, it sort of worked out. The result is we got to keep that person as a client for a long period of time, and she grew her business with us. But that result is really important, and if you don't give it, you're really not telling your whole story.
But the other part of that is, tell me the specifics. Not, well, we talked about this, and then it worked out. No, it didn't. Tell me what you did that was actionable, so that I, as the interviewer, know, well, that's pretty damn stellar. That's all right. Good job, Allison. And I'll make a nice note. Right? So it's often it's the details that make the difference more than anything else.
And I think when you're doing your research before you go for the interview, that's when you're going to want to learn about the company and see what situations they're in. Do they just hire a new CEO? Do they just have some layoffs? So what situations are you in, and what are you going to be able to come in and help them with?
That's an excellent point, Sophia. And actually the next point, which is telling stories in the interviews, can help you demonstrate the fit in the company culture and where it is that you align with what it is they're trying to achieve.
I agree. Telling that story can also open up the interviewer to be able to say, that's such a great story. Those types of situations happen here often. This is how we've solved them, or this is how we look at it different ways. Again, you're building that relationship. Relationship's going to get you hired, period.
Guys, just so that you know, we are live, but LinkedIn is getting kind of glitchy. So
we have storms here again.
Yeah, so I can tell that we are live, but if you can see, let me know if you can see me in the chat, because I can't see the live stream. It just says that we are live. So, okay. So now that we know and understand why we should be telling stories in the interviews, how are we going to do that?
Using the STAR method.
Yes.
But also, I think one thing that I do when I go in for an interview is research the company, write up all my stories, like what are some possible stories I could share, and then also I write the so what. Why is it important for them to know this, and really pulling the right results that will seem important to them. What's important to them, not just important to myself.
Oh, I like that.
Yes, it's kind of you need to recognize the audience. Exactly. You're telling the story specifically to the person. Now, you're not going to know, I don't know, if I'm coming in to interview with you, I don't know you because I just met you. So it's kind of like do the research, look stuff up on LinkedIn, maybe Facebook. They'll be very careful when you're, don't. Good research would be like, I saw that Allison was at the Mavericks game on her Facebook, and say, hey, oh my God, did you see the Mavericks game the other night? Just kind of casually knowing already that she's a fan. Bad research would be, hey, your daughter had her quinceañera the other day. How did that go? That will get you escorted out of the building
real quick
with security. So be very careful in using that research from Facebook. Sophia, you said a minute ago, you talked about brand and creating brand. What is a good way for somebody to come up with and consider their brand?
So before you even do that, what does that mean, creating a brand? I think that's, we talk about it all the time, but I don't think everybody knows what it means.
It means, like, how do you portray yourself? So, and if you don't know, because a lot of people don't know, ask your friends, ask your coworkers, ask them what is it that they like about you or don't like about you. So, but it's who you are, and it's how people perceive you, yes, or how you want to be perceived, because you can change that as well. So let's start there. And I think it's important when you go into an interview, you have to know who your brand is because you want to portray a positive brand. So talking to your close friends, asking good questions about that will help you be a better interviewer. One thing that I can advise is that I think a lot of people have problems when going into an interview, or some of the issues is being talking about themselves. It's hard. A lot of people don't like to tout all the great things that they've done, but I think it's important for them to practice if that's not something that they're really good at.
That's good. That's a great point because that is the one time when you do need to tell the person or whoever you're speaking to all the great stuff that you can do.
It's a tiny brag.
I mean, it is. It really is. You have to make sure that you are conveying that you are the best fit for the position, and if you can't tell a story correctly on why it is that they should hire you, you're probably not getting it hired.
It's like the first impression on a date, right?
Mm-hmm.
You only get a first time to make a first impression. So one time. So how do you want to be seen? How do you want to be perceived? What are you wearing? How are you going to be speaking? Are you going to be confident? What's your brand? Think about your unique abilities. What makes you different from everybody else?
Okay, so thanks everybody for chiming in. Shelly Franklin says hi. Leah Guskin is watching and says that we are live and doing great.
Hey, Leah.
And Zach Klein says the feed is good. That's great because I can finally now see us and the comments. I appreciate y'all letting me know that we are in fact live. So brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. Right. And so you're right. Everybody has a brand, whether they know it or not. And it's important for you to create your brand before somebody else brands you, because it might not be a favorable brand.
It's the one time when you have to take your mom's voice out of your head when she has said to you, don't brag, don't talk about yourself. Seriously, because that ruminates all the time. And so by being able to talk about yourself, especially in stories, it makes it that much more real and doable. And it also... the other thing in interviewing that I found is I personally, in people with whom I'm speaking, don't always like the I word. Well, I did this and I did that. I like the we word. As a team, we did this. I led the team and helped make decisions, but we worked together to solve the problem. So those are things to me that are really important. And I think that sets a brand too, that you can work. We all have to work in teams. I mean, we just do. It's part of the workforce today. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times now, we were talking earlier, sometimes the interviewers bring in their teams and they want the teams to see.
That's right. We Sophia, before you came in, Allison, Sophia and I were talking. It's like she interviewed with 7 people here.
Here?
Yeah. I was like, that's a lot of people to talk to.
But to be honest with you, it was a great experience because I was able to see if I was relatable to them, to the team I'd be working with, and the entire department, or it was an opportunity for them to see if I was a good fit for their team as well.
And I think that's a very interesting point, and I'm not sure if Leah was the one that set that up or not. Leah, if you're still watching, let me know, because here's why I'm interested. Because we are not a big company. This is not a corporation. Like, it's a small...
When you said 7, that's like, you
interviewed with everybody in the building, pretty much. Like, on that side of the building.
Except for you.
Up to and including Kathy. I would have interviewed you, Sophia. Nobody asked me. But to your point, like, because you're going to have to be working closely with these people every single day. And also, too, you're the director, so you're going to be managing most of them as well.
Right. And I think it's important when you're going to go for an interview to ask what the interview process is. This is what's the entire process? Who will I be meeting with? And then that way, when you're telling your stories, to really, you're going to tell a different story to the CEO than you would to the team that you're going to be working with, right? You're going to be explaining to them how you worked with in teams, how you led other teams. When you're speaking to the CEO, they're basically already just making sure that you're a good fit for the company or the organization.
Yes. Allison?
No, I think you're right on. I think that 7 people is a lot. I keep going back to that number 7. I think that's a lot, but it worked. So obviously there's a method to that madness, and it's obviously worked.
So Leah says, yes, she did set that up. I think it's so important to be interviewing for a good team and fit in addition to skills. By the way, Leah Guskin, guys, is our senior director of philanthropy and something else.
Development.
Community. Something that she made up.
Sorry,
Leah made up Leah made up her own title. Thanks for watching, Leah. Context. So important when you're telling a story in the interview, because storytelling experts define context as the why. It's the thing that drives the story. And context is established by three things: the setting, the characters, and the conflict. Okay, so setting. Where
do I
don't
go
even
from here?
Yeah. So setting. Like when you're telling the story, like where does it take place? Where does it start? Is it in an office? Is it on the production floor? Is it in
sales room?
A sales room. Like that. That's important. It sets the stage for what's about to happen next. And what is about to happen next is who's involved in the story. It's not going to be just you. You're going to be telling like what else is going to be happening in the story. Also, so when you're defining the characters, it is important to provide a little bit of a description of the person that it's painting with a more detailed stroke than just like, oh, and I was talking to Allison. I don't who is Allison? I don't know who Allison is. I get this. I work with clients and we work on the star stories with them, and it's like they just jump into the story and start telling me, okay, so I was talking to Sophia, and then I'm like, well, wait, hang on, back up. What's going on? Why are you talking to Sophia? Like, why are we even having the conversation? Like, explain it to me. Like, tell me the story. This is one of the reasons why we practice the stories, because if you don't understand the dynamics of how to tell the story, you're not going to succeed in telling the story in the interview.
In marketing, if you go back to the basics, when you're in school and you're taught to draft an essay and you're taught to learn, start with the who, what, where, and when, that kind of, maybe might be easier to remember, but also just simplifying it each piece, but not simplifying it so little that you're taking out the entire context. So it's really important to tell the story from the beginning, mentioning all the characters, but mentioning all the important details. And so really focusing on what are the important details, what do I need to say?
I think that the names aren't important. Jason, Sophia, Allison. What's important is I was talking to the director of marketing at Jewish Family Service, and what we learned was A, B, C, D, E. The way I looked at it was, whatever your answer is, the result in this conversation was to improve whatever it is. So now you've given to whom you were speaking, but that person now has a title, not a name. Name, again, isn't important, but that title and what the result will be and how it will improve the lives or the functions within the organization are what's important. Whenever you're asked questions, the final result is what every question is asked once. It's how you get there that's so important.
Right.
And just spewing, oh, I did that, and we increased sales by 500%.
What are your thoughts on asking a follow-up question saying, did I answer that question?
Oh, I think it's perfect. Or how does this relate to the job that we're talking about? Fit yourself into that. I think
right.
It's a great
important
question.
to continue to, an interview, we talked about this earlier, it doesn't need to be one way. It needs to be two-way communication.
Yeah, always.
You're interviewing the company or the organization to see if you're a good fit too. So this is a good opportunity to ask them as well.
So it's like a back and forth, like tennis.
Right.
And then you hit the ball over here, and then you hit back to you, and you hit back to them. I think it's important too to make sure that the timing on your stories is succinct. I recommend 90 seconds, and then if we need a follow-up question, or you ask the follow-up question, or it's like, did that answer your question? Or even better, Allison, I like, how does that fit into this role?
Yeah, 90 seconds, you're going to say, that's not very much time. When you're talking, 90 seconds is a long time, trust me. And so that 90 seconds is that time frame where people are still listening and they're not filling out their grocery list. Longer than that, they're thinking, oh, will this story ever end? So if it's a good story, and you're going to be able to see that they're really in tune with what you're saying, and you don't give all the information, that's when that conversation starts back and forth. Well, how'd you get into see Sophia? How did that situation occur? I mean, these are the questions that are going to build that relationship.
How do you think the person that's being interviewed would know if they're in tune? What would be some of those
I think
cues?
it's body language, if you see them writing, taking notes, those types of things.
That's a great question, and it's one that we don't talk about enough. It's like, how do you determine whether your audience is engaged? I think that body language is a great indicator. Are they sitting up straight? Are they leaning in while they're talking to you? Do they have the head tilt? Allison has the head tilt right now.
I always have head tilt.
Like that's the universal sign for I'm listening to you. You know? Or are they taking notes? Are they, like this, like listening to what you're saying? Do they have follow-up questions?
Bingo. That's
Right?
a big one.
That's how I think that you know that you still have them and that they're not doing their grocery list or I'm kind of hungry. What's for lunch later? I'm always wondering what's for lunch later. So Phil said, Phil Kinnicky, our client services manager, says a good brand helps people want to help you rather than you asking for help. Thanks, Phil. I think the other thing to remember when telling stories, we do it all the time. It's something that we do on a daily basis. Whether, you're talking about how you were running late and there was traffic and you took an alternate route and then you didn't know that on that street there would be construction and that slowed you down, or how you solve the problem at work. It's the same thing. Pretty much in everything, conversations we have with people, we're telling stories.
Right. But when we talk about telling stories, people freeze up. Well, I don't know how to do that. You do it all the time.
All the time.
So it's up to the interviewer also, I think, to make the interviewee feel comfortable. And again, a lot of interviewers don't know how to interview. And so that creates an area for you to help that person feel comfortable. And I think that's really important. And Jason has a group of professionals who are helping do mock interviews. And if you would like to set a time up to do that, you
can email me. So the next time we are doing the practice interviews they're virtual.
Mm-hmm.
You can participate anywhere in the world. And we do them the second and fourth Tuesday of each month at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock Central Time. The next one is Tuesday, the 11th. And I do have one spot open left at 1 and one spot at 2. If you are interested, first come, first serve, email me. My email is the letter J, Hopper, HOPPER, at jfsdallas.org. Put mock interview in the subject line and tell me what time you want, either 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock Central. They go fast.
I wanted to just throw something out before we change the subject again. When it comes to telling the story, I think it's important to show your personality, right? Like tell this personality as who you are, because you want them to see your true self. You want them to connect with you, and I think if you're going to feel more comfortable that way if you're being yourself, versus trying to sound more intelligent. But if you're your true self, you're going to be more confident telling that story.
I think. Go ahead.
When you interviewed with the team. I'm presuming you interviewed with Leah first, then the team,
right,
and then Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
How did you change yourself because they're all different groups and levels?
Sure. So when I first interviewed with Leah, it was the questions were more about skills and abilities, and telling those stories of like how I've gone through conflict and how I've succeeded in the past. And I think when I met with the team, I really focused on, how have I led really successful teams? How it always hasn't been easy, but how we've overcome those challenges, and also how I like to work with them. And then just told them stories about myself and my past. And I thought that I was able to connect with them and be relatable to every team member.
And Kathy?
And with Kathy, I think by the time we got to Kathy, she was just really wanting to know more about fit and personality. And I think she even mentioned that during the interview, and made me feel more comfortable about that because I already reached the interview process where that usually occurs. But I felt like it was more about, yes, you want to show your skills and abilities, but also show how you can be a contributing member to her team as well.
So these are three different groups of people with they even have different skill sets. And so I think it's important to be able, and Sophia hit it right on the head, is that you talk to the person and quickly try and figure out who they are so that you know how to talk to them. And I think that's really important. And with Kathy even telling you that, that's, a great way to do it.
Yeah, and I think when you're going to be asked to go back for a second interview or third to meet with the team, ask the manager, who am I meeting with? What do they do? How would I be interacting with them? And if that doesn't come up in that first interview, when you're in that interview, that was one question I asked every team member. How would I be working with you? How can I make how our working relationship more successful? How can I make what are your wants? How would I be making your department more successful? And so I was able to connect the dots with my skills and abilities with what their needs and wants were.
That's a great description. And also I think that once you tell your story, again, asking, does this fit into your mission or your the way you manage or how you work, so that we know we can work well together. Be honest with that person you're interviewing with, because if and when you get hired, you're going to be with them a lot. So you need to be able to know if the culture is right for you, if all these different aspects of work are important.
I think that you hit one important factor. It's always important to ask questions about the culture, decision making, approval process,
yes.
Because all these are things that are going to create your environment, and are you okay with that? So one of the things I learned during the interview process when I interviewed here was that the team works so closely together. It's a collaborative decision, collaborative meetings, versus you're going to be in your room in your office working alone. And I really like that. I really appreciate that process or that work environment, but some people don't thrive in that environment.
Exactly.
But asking those questions and making sure that that it's a good fit for you. Not only are they looking for it if you're a fit for them, but this is your opportunity to ask questions as well.
I think culture questions are so important in the interview process, because a lot of job seekers aren't asking culture-based questions. It's something that helps set you apart from everybody else. Also, too, you're correct. You want to understand what type of environment you're getting into, and so you can't just ask, well, how's your culture here? You can pick that stuff up off of the website, the company's website, and understand what their mission statement is and what it is they are all about. I've said before, like I take notes in my phone for like everything, and I had easily this much notes I typed out about Jewish Family Service coming into the interview, and that I was working at the time, but I made my job to get this job. That's all I did. Is anytime I had a free moment, I was looking at my notes and I was practicing to tell my story for when I came in here. So, by the way, Leah did put in the chat that they were not all individual interviews. Sophia confirms that. And Basha says, email me for virtual interviews. Thank you, Basha, for that as well. So, what we learned today is that it is important to tell stories in interviews and that you should be the hero of your own story and how you solve all of your problems. Final thoughts.
I think the one thing that we didn't talk about is, and you kind of mentioned it, was it's important to look up the company's values and be aware of them so that you're able to really connect the dots. Like, how do you fit in with those values? Because there's some companies I looked up before I even interviewed and they didn't really connect with my values. So that was difficult. And then there were some where it was a perfect match, like here.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm going to say this, and it can occasionally happen, if the values don't, we had someone here at JFS who worked somewhere prior to us, and she said in the interview, she knew it was not going to be a good match. But she was so hungry for a job, she took it, and it ended up ending badly. And so when you know, you don't have to accept that job, even though you know, and I do understand you need to pay your bills,
There's
you
the
need
fear.
work, you need a job, there's that fear. But if you know it's going to end badly, it's probably better that you move ahead and do something else, because while you're there, it's miserable. I mean, it's not fun getting up in the morning.
So that's a great point. You lose your job or you don't have a job for whatever the reason, and then you're right, you start to worry, and the fear sets in, and you worry about your bills and your kid and food and all of the things, and then it's like you get a job offer, and you're like, yes, I'm going to take it, and you're like, this job sucks, and then like why did I say yes? And now you're in the same boat, and you're back to looking. I mean, if it's a cash flow situation, I mean, taking a bridge job is fine. Or I love the story. You worked at the Gap for a couple of years because cash flow. It's not that you didn't have a job.
We had
It's
three
just
kids in college.
That's right.
And Steve was starting a company, and you do what you have to do. So I worked full time, and then I got a part-time job at the Gap with 18-year-olds.
But to your
It
point,
worked.
but if that's the situation where you just need some cash flow, getting a retail job or just or a side hustle or a gig job off of Fiverr or something, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you are doing what you need to do to survive, and keep going on the process to interview to get into your next dream job.
And gig jobs today in part-time positions, I look at them and really respect people who do that because it means that you have initiative and you're doing something. It's not your dream job. It's not what you want to do for the rest of your life, but you're doing something to remain sustainable and pay your bills. And to me, that's great.
I think paints the picture that you're not just sitting around and waiting for something to happen. You're hungry and you're motivated to get better.
And to circle back, you could be working on your brand so you can be a better interviewer.
Work on your brand. That's right.
And when I was at the Gap, I can't tell you how many people, because the same people come in, so you get to know them and they ask for you and that kind of stuff, would say, have you ever thought of doing something else while I do something else? So no, I mean, we've got so there are opportunities that you never know where they're going to come up.
Well, and you got clients out of that as well. I was an on-site manager at a client site, and it was a huge on-site. There were like 400 people. So they brought in, another agency, and they just had like 75 people. But the recruiter that managed them, she had like a part-time job at like wherever. Anybody that came through the line that mentions anything about, I need a new outfit for interviewing. Oh, you know what? I'm a recruiter. Here's my card. It just worked out, right?
Those things do work.
They do. All right. So, guys, we're like at time. So, Sophia, at the end of every episode, we ask like a fun question. You stop, Allison. I'm gonna make it an easy one.
Okay. Good.
All right. What TV show are you currently obsessed with?
I would say Bridgerton.
Bridgerton.
We just started again.
It's really
The new
good.
season.
It's really good. I think, I'll just leave it at that.
And that's a Shonda Rhimes show,
It
right?
is.
Okay.
It is. I love Shonda Rhimes.
Allison, what are you obsessed with?
So we're watching that
Yes.
because you just have to. And also the one I told you yesterday, is it called Your Honor?
Your Honor. Yes.
Oh, it's
With
so
Bryan
good.
Cranston.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm on the I'm getting close to ending the second season of Big Sky.
I saw that.
Yeah,
which is
That's one of my
David
favorite.
E. Kelly created shows.
really good.
And what I really liked is like the end of the first season, like set up the second season, and it continued in the second season. I'm thinking at the end of the second season, it's going to
It
bleed
does.
into the third. So I'm kind of excited to get to the end of that. So that's what I am currently obsessed with. All right, that has been Caffeinate Your Career for this week, guys. Next week, Shelley Franklin is watching Tracker. I watched Tracker as well. It was awesome. I'm waiting for next season. It's got
Someone.
the guy that was in This Is Us that played Kevin.
Oh yeah.
Justin, whatever his last name is. All right, next week I will be back, and we have another special guest. We have Greg Williams, who is a workforce development specialist here. He'll be talking about how to build brand on social media. We were just talking about building brand. So I'm going to see you next week for that. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.